Hello, bourgeois. The world is a scary and dangerous place, and year after year it is getting even more chaotic. So it is really hard to imagine what to expect in the nearest future. With the tendencies that we see now, it is easy to find out that the number one possibility for almost every country is the possibility of war happening. And so I find it very important for you, the person that lives in Germany, in France, in Poland, in Estonia, in Latvia, in Europe in general, to think about what might happen in the nearest future, about the dangers. But it will be no good use just to sit in your mind and to get to the conclusions that might not resemble the reality. So I am here to give you the reality check of what it is at the beginning of war, because I am from Ukraine and I have lived through two different beginnings of war, in 2014 and in 2022. Every time it was different, but still there are some resemblance that are, I think, important to elaborate on. The first and maybe the most important thing to keep in mind is that every war is different, and still every war is similar. Yes, there are different technicalities of what one country is capable of and the other is not. What are the military compatibility? What is the geography? That is all very important. But still, in every country live people, and people are in general more similar than not. Again, every country is different and people that live in every country are different. There is no such thing as equality between people, I'm sorry. And still there are generalizations that are useful to keep in mind. That is why I am making this video here for you. The second most important thing to keep in your mind is that everything will happen not the way that you expect it will be. No one can see into the future. We can just estimate what might happen, what our reaction on this will be, what the reaction of our neighbor on the experience will be, and what will be the general experience of general public. But those are just estimates. Those have nothing in common with the reality that will come in future. So we can get used to the thoughts that we can make ourselves prepared for something that will come into the future, but we can never know what exactly will come. And so we have to be prepared pretty much for everything. We have to be adaptable. I would like to start with the first beginning of the war back in 2014, as I think that Ukrainian experience from that time is more relevant to Europe in the nearest future, at least because it happened very fast and no one could expect, no one could imagine that the country in the middle of Europe might get invaded, that the war might happen, and still it happened. This is the more relevant experience, for example, for Estonia, which is possibly the primary target for Russia in the nearest war. For example, in 2027, who knows? It is the primary target because of its proximity. It is also the primary target because of the Narva region, which is already prepared by the Russian Special Forces, FSB, for the future armed conflict with reasonable deniability in the name of the creation of Narva Republic. If you know what happened in 2014 with the creation of so-called DNAR and LNR, so Donetsk People Republic and Luhansk People Republic, you understand what I'm talking about. And if you don't, I will explain it to you now. A little premise. Back in that time, in 2014, I was only 12 years old, so I can only recall some of my memories and use my already accumulated knowledge by this time to grasp what has happened before. It is not like completely first-hand experience, but it is still more than you might have experienced. So basically, for about a decade before the invasion, since about 2004, Russia has been creating the foreground for the future creation of the separatist republics. They have seen the social unrest in that region, that there are some people that are more heartwarming towards Russia than towards Ukraine, and it exploited it. How did it do it? It used its secret services, FSB, as the diplomatic delegations, diplomatic and cultural delegations in the region. They have created the summits for Eurasia, for understanding and its economic prosperity between Ukraine and Russia and so on. So creating a place where Russia is always in close proximity, that people that live here feel like Russia has always been there. So Russia was forcing the civil unrest, and she used the already existing marginalized groups. They radicalized them even more. They have given them arms, and then at the peak of civil unrest in 2014, as the Euromaidan, the Revolution of Dignity, they moved very quickly. They exploited this exactly civil unrest. They have armed those marginalized groups. They have provided them with instructions, with expertise, and they also gathered the so-called volunteers. Every single which of them is a part of FSB Secret Service somehow. I guess there are many volunteers in Russian Secret Service that decided to aid the newly born republics for their independence, believe it. And they started the terror. By starting the terror, they also accused the Ukrainian defenders of doing terror. Go figure. As I have already told you, it all happened very fast, and Russia exploited the already civil unrest, the already ongoing revolution, as cover-up for the immediate push in Donbas region and Crimean Peninsula. Most of the common citizens couldn't really grasp about what has happened. People who lived very far away from the front line and didn't really care beforehand about the politics, there were many people like that. They were fed this misinformation about the civil war, the civil unrest, and the wish of the newborn republic to be independent. On the other hand, there were also some more people, I hope there were more people who understood that this is bullshit, because they have seen the clues that this doesn't add up, that people that lived there that didn't have the expertise and enough arms got exactly Russian weaponry that didn't exist beforehand in Ukraine. So I guess someone is lying there. On the topic of not getting everything seriously and not completely grasping the whole situation that is going on, I have my own experience from that time. My family and also I lived in a pretty close proximity from the front lines at that time, about, I guess, 200 or 300 kilometers from there. My mother was driving our family from the outskirts of Dnipro city inside. And on our way there was a checkpoint, a block post with military personnel. We didn't fully understand why was it there, and we couldn't see the signs that asked to slow down and then completely stop directly at the checkpoint. And so my mother was driving carefully but also carelessly through the blockades. Then when the military personnel stopped us, he told my mother about the error that she made, because as she was driving and as she didn't slow down and didn't stop when it was needed, the military personnel could have legally opened shot on this car because it might be threatful. Fortunately, at that night, my whole family survived, and now I can tell you about my experience back there. On the one hand, there were many civilians who couldn't really grasp what was going on, the seriousness of the whole situation, and on the other hand, there were people that could see through the bullshit that was coming from Russia inside Ukraine, and they have decided themselves to help their country, to help Ukraine survive at the beginning. Of course, I'm talking about volunteers, the first line of defense of each war. The first thing that might shock you is that the first volunteers, the core of the volunteers, were the football hooligans. It so happened in Ukraine that the most politically conscious people at that time were also those who created unrest during the football matches. Go figure. And so the core of the volunteer brigades were created. You most likely have heard about some of the more experienced and more famous brigades that back then were battalions, such as Azov battalion, or even possibly Pravy sector or the right sector. Those at the beginning, and I guess right now also, were volunteer brigades. So people just came there to fight, and at the beginning they didn't earn anything. They didn't get absolutely anything for that. If you want to learn more about Azov battalion, Azov brigade, you can watch my previous video. I will link it below. For me to grow this channel, I need your engagement. So please leave a like, subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments what will you do if your country gets invaded. But with the appearance of volunteer battalions, Russia has also found the scapegoat for its atrocities. So basically, it made some terrorist attacks and then it claimed that it wasn't Russia, it wasn't Girkin, the famous terrorist from FSB. He is right now in prison in Russia because he said some shit about Putin. And even if you are very capable and you say stuff about the Tsar, about Putin, then you go to jail. But I digress. And with that, they have created the very big monstrosity of Russian propaganda of scapegoating the volunteer brigades, and the top target of them is Azov battalion, because they were just that capable, that they were so capable, so Russia feared them, so they scapegoated them the most. It was very effective, unfortunately. So effective, so many people in Ukraine really were more feared of Azov battalion even more than of Russians. And this is just how Russian misinformation campaign works. They have a lot of money to just pour down the bullshit into people's minds. And just as Goebbels has told, I guess, many times, that the lie that is told 1,000 times becomes the truth. Another thing of providing Russia with plausible deniability is not providing its soldiers with identification. It is more about the Crimean War. So what do I mean? As Crimea has been occupied, there somehow appeared little green men. So military personnel, soldiers that are not identifiable. Just some guy in military uniform with balaclava so no one sees their face, and without the chevrons that identify the country that they are from, their brigade or anything. So those are just armed people in uniform that went to another country, allegedly. We know that this is true already, so it's not a secret anymore that those are Russians. One of the way that we know is that Putin himself adored people for liberating Crimea, people who took part in it, with the medals, especially for that. So, I mean, they never were there, but still we adore them and we provide medals for their honor. Crazy, fucking mind-blowing. And so in 2014 started that war that continued in 2022 and continues now. In the time in between 2014 and 2022, there was an organic development of this war. So basically the intensity of the shootings went down year after year. At first a bit, then more and more and more. And so since about 2019, there were next to no casualties from military personnel from both sides, and I believe that's absolutely no civilian casualties. But it didn't happen just because it happened. Since 2014, Ukraine has poured a lot of money and a lot of resources to stabilize the front, stabilize the situation that it doesn't move forward. There were many heroic deeds like Donetsk airport or the Baltics and others. You can find out about them more if you are interested in this topic. And so what started as maneuver warfare boiled down to the positionary warfare, where people sit in the trenches in some proximity from each other. They look at each other and mostly do nothing, because at that time it was hard to meaningfully move frontline one way or another way. People still died, but not that often. And although this stalemate continued for a couple of years and Russia still managed to do terrorist attacks, Europe didn't really care about that. Europe didn't really care about what happened in the neighboring country. And to be clear, most of Ukrainians, also I, did not really care what was happening on the east. So it was the general problem, the problem of everyone. So what I am telling right now is that although the environment was very unfavorable for Ukraine, it still managed to manage the risk and to have some economic prosperity in this time. Although the war happened on the territory of Ukraine, people died, the GDP at the beginning fell drastically, I guess for about 30%. The steps forward were made. These steps to stabilize the front were made, to bring some prosperity to Ukrainians were made, to bring Ukraine closer to Europe were made. Most of the people outside of Ukraine did not care about Ukraine, and still we moved forward. So if you want to take anything from what I am ranting about, is that the only thing that might help you during the war is to move forward. The one who stays at the same place all the time is a sitting duck for propaganda or for arms. Think further. But last things told, if you disagree with me, you are definitely right, but still you are probably wrong. Till the next time.